All right, let's dive deep into the mind of Ghulam Reza Rashidi today.
Sounds good.
His book, Dar Tariat Ma,
In Our Path, for those of us who don't speak Farsi.
right, In Our Path, thanks for that. And we're focusing on, well, it's rationality and spirituality, but it's more than that, right?
It really is. Especially because Rashidi uses Carl Jung, as a jumping off point.
Yeah, he agrees with Jung, but then takes it somewhere completely new.
He takes those ideas and flips them in a fascinating way.
So Jung's concept of that wall of rationality, is it as solid as it sounds?
Well, Jung believed that we, especially now in the modern world, we've become so focused on logic, on reason, that it's like we've built this wall around ourselves, almost without realizing it.
And we end up kind of, I don't know, trapped behind it.
You could say that. Trapped, or at least limited. We're shutting ourselves off from other ways of knowing and experiencing the world, Intuition, feeling, maybe even spiritual insight.
It's interesting because Jung uses this phrase, sense of greatness, to describe what we might feel if we could break through that wall.
Like something amazing is waiting on the other side.
Exactly. So what is it? What are we missing out on?
Well, Rashidi agrees that this wall is a problem, but he sees rationality's role a bit differently than Jung.
Okay, how so?
Think about it like this. He uses this analogy of mother's milk.
Mother's milk.
Yeah. Think about a baby. Milk is absolutely essential early on, right?
Sure, of course.
But if you keep trying to feed, a growing child only milk, they're going to be in trouble.
They need more to thrive, right? More than just milk.
Exactly. They need solid food. And that's kind of what Rashidi is saying about rationality. It's crucial at the beginning, like when we're developing.
But we can't just stay there.
Right. We can't just stay there. We need to move on to more nourishing, more substantial ways of understanding the world.
So I'm starting to see where you're going with this. Rationality, it's like that milk. Important early on, but not the whole story.
Not the whole story at all. Rashidi's saying relying only on rationality to get through life, it's like trying to solve every problem with, I don't know, a spreadsheet.
So you're saying logic isn't everything?
It's not that it's bad, it's just that it's limited. It doesn't capture, the full complexity of being human.
Yeah, I get that. Sometimes I get so caught up in, planning, analyzing everything that I kind of lose sight of the big picture.
And that's exactly what Rashidi's getting at. This constant calculating, this need to win at life using only logic, it actually becomes a trap.
A trap? How so?
We become fixated on specific outcomes. Got to achieve this, got to get that. We miss out on the journey itself, on how everything is interconnected.
So if we're not supposed to approach life with this win-lose mentality, what's the alternative?
He uses a really interesting analogy here. Imagine a chessboard, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now, we often think of ourselves as those individual pieces on the board.
Yeah.
Black versus white, battling it out.
Right, always trying to conquer the opponent.
But Rashidi suggests we change our perspective. He says, see yourself as the chessboard itself.
Okay, and now that's interesting. So not black versus white, always fighting, but the board itself.
Exactly. Neutral. Providing the space for the game to happen.
So it's not about taking sides. It's about being the ground where it all plays out. That's kind of a mind-bending idea.
It is. It really is. It's about shifting from this conquering mindset to one of experiencing.
I have to admit, part of me is a little unsure about this. Doesn't it sound a bit passive? Like, just let life happen to us?
That's a common misunderstanding. It's not about being passive. It's about understanding that we're part of something much bigger than just ourselves. It's still about action and engagement.
Okay, so there's still a role for us to play, but
it comes from a different place. A deeper understanding of our place in the grand scheme of things.
And how do we tap into that different place you're talking about?
That's where Rashidi's idea of spiritual perception comes in. And that's a whole other layer we can peel back.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier, but let's dig in. What exactly is spiritual perception?
It's not about suddenly developing psychic powers or anything like that. It's more about cultivating a different way of seeing. It's this fluid, intuitive awareness that goes beyond just our intellect.
So it's a shift in how we perceive things rather than gaining some kind of supernatural ability.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is, he suggests we might already be having glimpses of this spiritual perception without even realizing it.
You mean like sometimes you get those aha moments, like a solution to a problem just pops into your head?
Exactly. Or those times when you just have this strong gut feeling about something, even if you can't really explain why.
And maybe those are actually like cracks in that wall of rationality we talked about, little glimpses of what's on the other side.
I like that. I like that a lot. And for Rashidi, these moments, these glimpses, they're not just random. They're pointing to a deeper reality, a deeper reality that's always there, always available to us if we can just learn to tune in.
Okay, now I'm really seeing how these pieces connect. Jung's wall, the limitations of pure rationality, this idea of spiritual perception. But how do we develop it, this spiritual perception? Where do we even begin?
Well, that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm hooked already. So for all of you deep divers out there, stick around because we're just getting started. We're going even deeper into the mind of Golem Reza Rashidi next. Back again with our deep dive into Golem Reza Rashidi and his work.
We're picking up where we left off, really digging into his ideas about, moving beyond that purely rational way of looking at things.
We were talking about how too much emphasis on, just logic can be kind of like, I don't know, trying to navigate using like a really basic map.
Yeah, like you might get the main landmarks, but
you miss all the good stuff, the hidden paths and those little detours that make a journey worthwhile.
Exactly. You miss the richness of the full experience.
And before we took a break, you mentioned that Rashidi actually gives us like some tools, some practices to develop this spiritual perception.
He does. And he really emphasizes that, spiritual growth, it's a process, not a finish line you cross.
It's funny you should say that. I was reading something about like the psychology of goal setting. And it was saying that too much focus on the end goal can actually make us less happy right now, like in the present moment.
It's so true. When we're always striving for that perfect outcome, we miss the beauty of what's happening right in front of us.
Which is where the real growth happens, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so less focus on achieving enlightenment and more about being present in the process. But how do we actually do that? It sounds kind of vague.
Well, one practice Rashidi really emphasizes is, meditation.
Meditation? That's not exactly a new idea.
True, but it's powerful in its simplicity. You can think of it as a way to train your attention. Create some space between your thoughts and your awareness.
So it's about learning to, watch your thoughts without getting swept away by them.
Exactly. It's not about, emptying your mind completely.
That always seemed impossible to me.
It is. It's more about creating space, letting thoughts come and go without clinging to them.
It's like watching, clouds drift by. You see them, but you don't try to grab them or analyze them.
Such a great analogy. You just let them be.
Okay, that actually makes a lot more sense. I used to think meditation was like this battle to force myself to think nothing.
A lot of people think that.
Yeah.
But it's more about observation, creating that spaciousness.
Which feels way more doable, honestly.
And what's really fascinating is that as we get better at this stillness through meditation, we start to notice things we might have missed before.
Like what?
Well, we become more aware of our inner world. Those subtle sensations, those emotions that are always there, but we usually just brush past them.
So it's not just sitting on a cushion with your eyes closed?
Nope, not at all. Meditation can be so many things. Rashidi even talks about bringing this awareness to everything you do.
Everything. Like even just, washing the dishes.
Even washing the dishes, walking, eating anything really. It's all about the quality of your attention.
Bringing that same awareness we practice in meditation, but into, everyday life.
Exactly. And when you do that, it can really transform your experience.
Okay, so meditation is one tool for this whole, spiritual perception thing.
Mm-hmm.
What else does he suggest?
Contemplation is another big one.
Is that just a fancy way of saying thinking?
Well, it's more than just, random thoughts bouncing around. Contemplation is about engaging with big questions, really reflecting on your experiences and exploring different perspectives.
So using your mind, but in a more focused way.
Exactly. Like a tool for deeper understanding, not just running on autopilot.
So it's like meditation, but more active, where you're choosing what to focus on.
Yeah, I like that way of putting it. It's about, really wrestling with ideas, exploring different angles and letting insights emerge organically.
I kind of do that when I'm writing. If I get stuck, I'll just stop and think about it from all these different angles.
And sometimes the answer just comes to you.
Oh, like out of nowhere.
That's contemplation in action. It's about giving your mind the space to work through things without forcing it.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got meditation for stillness, contemplation for, actively engaging with ideas. Are there any practices that are more, active? Involving movement, maybe?
Rashidi talks about that too. Mindful movement, he calls it.
Like yoga or Tai Chi, those sorts of things.
Those are great examples. But it can also be something as simple as, taking a walk in nature,
But it's not just any walk, right?
Right. The key is bringing that same mindful awareness we've been talking about, but to your physical actions.
Paying attention to how your body feels, what's around you.
Exactly. And when you do that, you might find you experience a sense of flow, like your body and mind are working together more smoothly.
I actually notice that when I go for walks in the park. If I can just, quiet my mind and really pay attention to like the feel of my feet on the ground, my breath, it's incredibly grounding.
That's the power of mindful movement. It's a way to reconnect with your body, with the present moment, in a very tangible way.
So it's like we have this whole toolkit now. Meditation, contemplation, mindful movement, all for developing that spiritual perception.
And the really interesting question is, how does all of this tie back to Rashidi's critique of, rationality? How does it help us move beyond that limited view?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something we'll be exploring further in the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into the ideas of Ghulam Reza Rashidi.
We're really getting to the heart of his book now, exploring how to, move beyond that purely rational worldview.
It's funny, isn't it? We've been using logic and reason, like having this very rational conversation, to explore the idea of moving beyond rationality.
That is a bit ironic when you think about it.
It's like we're using the tools of the wall to try and see what's on the other side.
And it actually illustrates something Rashidi emphasizes. It's not about getting rid of rationality entirely.
So we're not throwing logic out the window.
Not at all. It's more about, recognizing its limits, integrating it with other ways of knowing.
So it's not logic versus intuition, but logic and intuition working together.
Exactly. Like imagine rationality as a spotlight.
A spotlight. Okay.
It helps us focus on specific details, analyze information, make logical connections. But spiritual perception, that's more like a floodlight.
Okay. I'm seeing the difference. One's narrow, focused. The other illuminates a wider area.
Exactly. And as we've been discussing, Rashidi offers these practices to cultivate that floodlight awareness, right?
Meditation, contemplation, mindful movement. We've covered a lot.
We have. But there's another key piece we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, what's that?
Desire.
Desire. How does that fit in with all of this?
Well, Rashidi says the kinds of desires we cultivate, the things we want, they can either limit or expand our experience of life.
So some desires are better than others.
It's not that simple. It's more about the underlying mindset driving that desire. He talks about desires driven by scarcity and desires driven by abundance.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Think about like the desire for wealth. When it's driven by scarcity, that fear of not having enough.
It can lead to some pretty negative stuff.
It can. Competition, hoarding, always feeling like you're lacking something.
Never being satisfied with what you have.
Exactly. But when that same desire for wealth, when it's driven by abundance, a genuine desire to create and share.
That feels very different.
It leads to generosity, collaboration, a feeling of interconnectedness with others.
So it's not the desire itself, but the energy behind it, the why.
Exactly. And Rashidi suggests that by shifting our focus from scarcity to abundance, we can transform our relationship with desire and ultimately transform our experience of life.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like remembering that we're not all separate, competing for limited resources.
Right. It's remembering that we're all part of this intricate, interconnected web.
So how do we do that, this whole cultivating abundance thing?
It's not just, positive thinking. It's a conscious effort.
What kind of effort?
Cultivating certain qualities. Gratitude, generosity, compassion.
Those sound, well, kind of spiritual.
They are. And Rashidi argues that these qualities, they're not just moral virtues.
There's something more.
They're pathways to a deeper experience of reality. By practicing gratitude, we appreciate the abundance that's already there. Generosity breaks us free from that scarcity mindset. And compassion, it helps us recognize our shared humanity.
It's interesting. We started talking about the limits of rationality, but this feels like we're really talking about, well, how to live a good life.
And for Rashidi, living a good life, it requires both head and heart. The clarity of reason and the wisdom of the soul.
It's about embracing the full spectrum of human experience, isn't it? The light and the shadow, the rational and the intuitive.
Finding that balance between, effort and surrender.
This has been a truly mind-expanding deep dive into Ghulam Reza Rashidi's work. It's given me a lot to think about, a lot to explore further.
And remember, this is just the beginning of your own journey. Keep asking questions, keep digging deep.
And who knows what you might find? Maybe you'll discover your own path beyond that wall of rationality. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.